The Oklahoma Sooners offseason just got a massive shakeup, and we've got to react to it really, really quick. Welcome back to the Schooner Pod. Okay, so welcome back to the Schooner Pod. Long time no see. This is not how we wanted to relaunch, but we have to talk about this massive news here. Recording on July 7th. This is 9:52 a.m. and we have to report, or well, we're not reporting, but we're reacting to the news from ESPN's Pete Thamel that Joe Castiglione will retire in this upcoming school year. So Josie, an incredibly long tenured athletic director for the Sooners, been in the role for 25 plus years, hanging up the fedora and will retire. So after this, so it's not with immediate effect. He will be looking and helping the Sooners find their next athletic director in the coming months. Afterwards, he will serve as the athletic director emeritus for the Sooners. So kind of special behind the scenes role, that sort of deal, where he'll have some sort of control over it. But you would imagine that the search for Joe Castiglione's successor starts now. And for OU fans, it really, this has to come as, this is probably coming as a mixed bag to some of y'all. It should be about a uniformed, like, nothing but appreciation for what this man did for the University of Oklahoma, what he did for the program. I feel like what Castiglione did, widely regarded as one of the best athletic directors in college athletics, what he did to that Oklahoma program since, joining from Missouri in the 90s, he made it just overall one of the most balanced sports programs, athletic programs in the country. I feel like over his tenure, basketball has been pretty steady. Obviously, softball has turned into a powerhouse. Same with women's gymnastics. Baseball has seen a resurgence in coming years. But it was you always saw balance out of OU's athletic programs. And not only that, you saw like sustained, consistent success from football, which I get it. I know that's going to be the immediate snap response to this deal is, okay, now we got him out of the way, we can move forward, because the anti-Josie sentiment has been pretty strong for a couple years now. If you want to look at his legacy as a whole, the only real Achilles heel he's had is his failure to adapt to NIL, the portal, and, granted, it was a crazy world for everyone. That is a hard thing to adapt to, and if you wanted to nitpick and point at things, then I guess you could say that to some degree he did not navigate those early waters better. I feel like they repositioned themselves very well with the Jim Nagy hire. We'll talk about that more in depth once we get the full pod crew together. But outside of that, he led a very good, very consistent football program that was at the high heights of the sport and just could never get across the finish line for whatever reason. But that run, the Castiglione run in football, is something that most college football programs would kill for. Genuinely, Oklahoma under Castiglione, outside of those titles, outside of the rings, that's the last little bit there, has been incredibly successful. And I think, to me, when you look at Josie's tenure, you'll see an athletic department that transformed, that was well positioned, that is in a better place than it was in the late 90s. And I think a lot of that too has to come with the SEC move. I know competition wise it wasn't there last year, the Sooners facing such a tough schedule and everything, but financially, and when you look at this landscape of college football, where it's heading, where that end game might potentially be, where you have a separation of, two massive conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC, he was able to get the Sooners where they needed to go safely. The SEC, as we've all noticed, after adding Oklahoma and Texas, hasn't been exactly chomping at the bit to add other teams. Florida State, Clemson, these other programs that felt like they could have a lifeline in future years are kind of on the outside looking in. And there's no guarantee the Sooners would get invited or welcomed into the Big Ten as well with all of that. I mean, probably, yeah, but the fact of the matter is he took Oklahoma's destiny into his own hands and moved them to the SEC and into a place where Oklahoma football is going to be relevant in the future, regardless of what happens. Like that is a protective barrier that will allow the Sooners to really thrive. And, competition might be dicey and everything, but they're in the pool. They're in the main mix because of what Castiglione did. Of course, with the coordination of Chris Del Conte at Texas, that move positioned Oklahoma for the future. Now, why retire now? It makes a lot of sense, honestly, with revenue sharing just being literally just being implemented several days ago. The sport has changed. The game has changed. The entire program, what college athletics has changed. That's literally the last show we did was an hour complaining about it. And it's hard to blame him for wanting to split. It's hard to blame him for wanting to, get out of the game a little bit. Let some young blood get in charge and, that can adapt and change. And it's gotten to the point where it's not a young man's game anymore. And if you are, you're used to one thing, you can operate great in this like specific area, and you've been doing it forever. And then all of a sudden it just gets flipped on its head. Then yeah, you've had a good career. It's totally fine to hang it up. And, I think too, let's just call a spade a spade. Castiglione gets in on his own terms. He is not beholden to what happens with Brent Venables' football season this year. If an entire, we don't even need to go down the injury route with this team, but he is not beholden to the results of the football team. And I think that's for a guy like Castiglione who has, will and should have such a deep, incredible legacy at Oklahoma, with all of the success he's had. He has earned that right to go out on his own terms. He has earned that right to not have to force, Joe Haraz or the Board of Regents' hand and fire him. That's, plain and simple. He gets to go out his way. And he has earned that route. He has deserved that route. And, whether or not you believe that Castiglione should go or shouldn't go or can still perform, I think we can all agree that if this season didn't go well, or if the program continued to go down this path, then yeah, you probably do have to shake things up and make changes. And I don't think OU fans want that. I don't think OU fans would have wanted to have to kind of put him out to pasture. So in a way, and he again, this has just come out as reported, by Pete Thamel. We haven't had a presser or anything. So we'll deep dive into that later as it comes. This is Castiglione's chance to end on his own terms. And I think that's something that is incredible and good for him. Not only that, but if you want someone to pick your next athletic director, there's no person on the planet you would want to be in charge of that search than Joe Castiglione. Someone who, I believe the stat I read it somewhere, I believe 32 athletic directors had served under Castiglione in his tenure at Oklahoma and Missouri, between Oklahoma and Missouri. And that's absolutely unreal. So obviously deep connections anywhere. And if you want to start talking about names, I know the name that we've all talked about for years, since he left the program to become the athletic director at Mississippi State, is Zach Selman, who served directly under Castiglione for years, was his right-hand man, and has taken up that mantle at Mississippi State. So if you want to look at a list, nobody really has one. I don't have one because we've all thought that the heir apparent's going to be Zach Selman. Obviously, Selman, related to the famous Selman brothers. He is Sooner born, Sooner bred. He's got that OU DNA deep, And that's he is from OU royalty. And, I feel like if Oklahoma wants to go get him, I feel like they can. And I think, I don't know, it's too early to say they will, they won't. I think they'll take a thorough search, but the clear choice feels like it's going to be Zach Selman at Mississippi State. And we'll see if that pans out. I don't know. I imagine they'll try to make it thorough. I would hope they would make it thorough, not just give it to him. But if you want to go the continuity route, if you are retaining Joe Castiglione to make these, decisions, you're probably going to go with that continuity route. Then yeah, I feel like Zach Selman feels like an obvious next step. But we'll see how that goes. Overall, just a bit of a shocking bit of news, kind of out of left field. But yeah, again, as I stated earlier, this is not how we wanted to sort of relaunch ourselves into college football. I've been working on a schedule of getting the Schooner Pod back up and running, but hey, that's sports for you. Sometimes it jolts you awake and right into a quick emergency pod, which we never really do. But anyways, look, there's a lot more to talk about with this and more news to come out as it goes on. We'll cover that with all the guys. We'll get a proper pod for about Castiglione, about some of these big questions, and start firing up previews. And yeah, shocking bit of news, but one that I think will be intriguing to see. Intriguing to see how the future of Oklahoma athletics plays out, because Castiglione is leaving behind an incredibly special, incredibly prosperous athletic program. And it's pivotal. It's the end of an era proper. The Boren, Castiglione, Stoops triumvirate that, was so powerful, so great in the 2000s. The last vestige of that is gone. And it's a new era. It is a new era of Oklahoma athletics on the horizon. It's a new era of college athletics on the horizon. And it's going to be intriguing to see how it all pans out going forward. All right. Well, for me and the rest of the Schooner Pod, keep an eye out on a more in-depth pod with everyone. The whole gamut. 30 to 60 minutes. You never know with us. We'll have that coming soon. And if you discovered this, the show via the speedy stream, make sure to subscribe. I promise you, the full in-depth crew experience, a little bit different than me just ranting at my screen for 10, 15 minutes. So thank you all so much for watching. If you did, we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Boomer Sooner, everybody.